Hi, this is Lionel Cooper, District Counselor with Mark West Union School District, and I want to welcome you to this presentation on social emotional learning, mitigating trauma, and helping each child get emotionally ready for school during distance learning. I'm going to share my presentation with you really quickly. And thanks for your patience. And I read a statistic in the spring of this year that said that 91% of Americans have been affected by the pandemic. For many of us, we have not only dealt with distance learning, but we have endured many other traumatic experiences, including the fires over the past 4 years, and many aspects in our community that were once normal are no longer normal. And tonight we want to give you some information that you can use in helping your son or daughter work through such a very difficult time in our life. And I also want to acknowledge all of the parents and guardians out there and all the work that they're doing. This is not easy for any of us, and not easy for you. And I just wanted to let you know that tonight's presentation is about a support for you. And so one of the things before we get started is to let you know that our counseling program is up and running, and that we offer counseling support services through telephone and through cell phone or telephone or cell phone, and video conferencing. We offer video conferencing through a pretty secure platform called doxy.me or through Google Meets for up and coming sessions, perhaps in groups. Still working on all of that as well, but it is our hope to have group counseling soon to help kids not feel so isolated. We also offer parent counseling support. If you would like to talk to us, we're open and available. And we also offer crisis intervention and resource and support for teachers, parents, and administrators. So this is our counseling staff, and these are our trainees for this year. And Shira Goldberg and JJ Leshti are at Reevely Elementary. Gina Kilgore is at Mark West Elementary, and Sasha and Hannah are at San Miguel Elementary. Before we go on, one other thing that I wanted to share with you is that we have an electronic form available to you. And this is I need to see the counselor form. So I'm going to click on this real quick and show you. You can go to the district website and go to Educational Services and click Counseling. And then below, you'll see a counselor request form link, second paragraph. And you click on that, and you'll see that some information in regards to filling out a referral. Your email address, phone number, name. If you're a student or a parent, this is open for both parents and students. What school you go to or your child goes to, who your teacher is, grade level, and what you want to talk about. And then is it a big problem, a little problem, or a medium problem? And you don't have to specify those. We just need your email and your name and best phone number, and then you push send. And then both Mr. Garcia or myself will take a look, and then one of our team or one of us will reach out to you. So I'm going back to the presentation. And I wanted to start off tonight by talking briefly about social emotional learning. Our district's vision is making academic, emotional, and social needs of every child a priority. And this diagram of social emotional learning encompasses the district's vision. In this model, there are 5 components of the child's social emotional learning and well-being. One is self-awareness, managing emotions and behaviors to achieve one's goals. Self-awareness, recognizing one's emotions and values as well as one's strengths and challenges. responsible decision-making, making ethical, constructive choices about personal and social behaviors, relationship skills, forming positive relationships and working in teams and dealing effectively with conflict, social awareness, showing understanding and empathy for others. So then on the left, you see this diagram, and it's about balance, and that academic learning is as important as social emotional learning. That if students, or any person for that matter, has some stuff going on that they're not able to kind of work through and may need to talk with somebody or may need to figure out how to regulate their emotions better, once that happens, then they'll be much more able to access the curriculum of instruction in the classroom. So our social emotional learning is really of a discussion tonight with how do we help kids during this difficult time, and how do we work through that. So what I wanted to do was show a video on the social emotional learning, because this aspect really connects to what we're going to bring about tonight in regards to dealing with working with kids who are suffering from trauma. So let's begin.
Social and emotional skills are the essential skills for success in school, work, and life.
Social emotional learning centers their mind and body. It reduces their emotional tension so they can be open to new content and material. We find that academic outcomes increase exponentially when students are nurtured, loved, and cared for, that we get much more out of them when we first address social emotional needs. So for us, it's actually an academic intervention and not just an emotional one.
If we expect students to be college and career ready, it's important for us to focus on these skills and competencies: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. Self-awareness is the ability to identify your emotions, to be able to tie thoughts and feelings to behaviors.
We find that self-awareness is one of the hardest things for young people, being aware of their own body space and the impact of their words and emotions on other people. So a lot of the work we do is reflective, through conflict mediation, through circles, through journaling, having them see their own impact on the world, and then how to shift that or make a different choice next time.
Self-management is the ability to self-motivate, to have self-control, to regulate one's emotions.
In the classroom, that may be a breathing exercise, or that might be counting 5 or taking a break.
So with students who don't really know how to deal with their anger or don't really know how to resolve conflict, we're giving them a tool that helps them deal with it in a less stressful way.
Social awareness is about embracing diversity, showing empathy for others. Activities might include service learning projects, addressing social justice issues. Role-playing is a great opportunity for students to address how a person might have felt in a conflict on the playground.
We're going to see if other people have had some of the very same experiences around bullying that we've had.
You're in my boat if you have a bully now.
Well, I see a lot of people.
Relationship skills are important in project-based learning. It's the ability to work cooperatively with someone, to resolve conflict.
It's the one skill you need your whole life. You may not need calculus tomorrow, but you have to know how to work in a relationship, whether it's for a coworker or a life partner. You have to know how to handle conflict and how to handle challenges.
Sometimes at recess, Hermione would come over and just start talking about us and saying mean things.
Is it your job to make Danae's job at school hard?
I know it's a form of bullying, and sometimes I'll say sorry to her.
So you choose to be someone's ally and make a better choice.
Responsible decision-making is considering the well-being for self and others. It's evaluating the consequences for various behaviors or actions. We do this through shared agreements, one-to-one problem solving, or having students debate an issue.
If you were like, hey, Kashida, how much does an A cost in this class? And you like took out your wallet and I was like, $50 would work. Which one of us would be corrupt in that case?
You're the one that's asking for the money?
We're truly teaching these students to be productive citizens. We're teaching them life skills. We're teaching them how to problem solve effectively. We're teaching them how to be resilient.
I think of all the billions of dollars we've spent on Title I and all these intervention programs. And when all is said and done, what do we have to show for it? I think we're trying to teach technical things instead of devoting some of the resources to teach who you are as a person. Once you know who you are, then learning becomes exciting because you've already established a discipline.
It's important for teachers and principals to understand that it can't be a binder off the shelf. It can't be something that happens from 2:15 to 4:30 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It has to be part of the school culture.
Giving teachers flexibility, giving them a range of skills, giving them different ways that it can look, and allowing them to take their own personality and match that to what they want in their classroom has been the best way to get authentic, true practice.
If we continue to do what we've always done, we're always going to get what we always got. Is that good enough? I don't think it's good enough for the 21st century. We need to be the outliers to try things that have never been tried and see if they work. What are we waiting for?
So I bring this up to you, this presentation, for all of you, just to kind of get a sense of where we want to continue to go and how to support our kids in the 5 areas of social emotional learning, and just kind of for you to kind of have in your background as to how to proceed. And one of the things that I've been doing along with our team is talking with kids about things that they can do to deal with stress during distance learning. One is to take deep breaths and tell yourself it's going to be okay. And this, as simple as it is something that even you as parents can do, is to remind your children to do that, as well as remind each other to do that, even as adults. And then the next one, another thing is like teaching ourselves to remember that technology is not perfect. And if something does not go right with your computer, you'll not get in trouble for it. And always teaching our kids to ask for help, and it's also okay to ask for help for yourselves. And if you see something, say something. If it's not safe, tell the person to stop. And we ask kids to then connect it to what part of that on the social emotional learning wheel might that be connected to. So it could be something about self-awareness, it can be social awareness, responsible decision making. I mean, there's not a definitive answer, but it is something where this is kind of the structure of what we're trying to teach kids. And then take breaks from screen usage, that it's okay to help kids remind themselves to take a break and do other activities. I know that's really difficult in this time, especially with fires, want to stay indoors. And so I know this is not easy, and it may not be applicable at specific times, but it's something for you just to be aware of and knowing what you can say. We recommend that kids stop screen usage 1 hour before bed. It helps them fall asleep faster. If they're on their computers or on their devices before they go to bed, it'll take a while for them to relax and settle down. So this is, of course, this is a suggestion, but it's something that might work for your son or daughter. We remind kids to keep their passwords and personal information private and not to talk with people that they don't know online. That is a big one, especially during distance learning. Having conversations with our children about making sure that they ask for help if they're not sure about something or they feel unsafe, and then being, and then recognizing that this is all part of social emotional learning. And then also remembering, helping kids remember to be kind to each other during this time, and that includes when they're in their classrooms on distance learning. Being appropriate, knowing what to say, and then also asking for help. But I think also what's important for all of us to remember is that you're not alone. And I put that quote underneath the social emotional learning on each of these slides. So we're going to get into more of the distance learning. We're going to talk a little bit more about trauma-informed awareness and responsiveness. And we spoke a bit about some of the things that we can do as adults and educators in helping students to feel reassured that although this time is a very difficult one, they're not alone. And I wanted to move forward and look at how we can make sense of distance learning and the impact that it has on ourselves and on our children. Being a bit more aware about trauma can help us know how to work with kids during these difficult times. And while we look at this, I also want to point out that it's also about maintaining a balance between academics and social emotional learning, which I mentioned earlier. And although some people might argue that academics is a lot more important, I find that the mental health and social emotional understanding and well-being of ourselves is just as important, because we won't be able to access that curriculum if our emotions are somewhere else, or our feelings or our thoughts are somewhere else. And then when we look at how effectively we handle all the stressors of distance learning, it is essential to have some background understanding about trauma. And that's why I want to spend some time on this tonight. What is trauma specifically? What are the signs and symptoms? How do we help someone who might be working through trauma? And how do we take care of ourselves? So some important things to know about trauma. One, it's undue hardship. In looking at trauma, it is defined as deeply distressing or disturbing experience in terms of psychology. Here are some common and general things that are important when it comes to understanding trauma. So, for example, with hardship is associated with this. Not only did the situation occur, but the child or adult is left having to deal with the event. Hardship may take a long time, and finding outlets and support are so important during this time. It is important to know that during hardship, we must remember that one does not have to endure it all by themselves. And then there's ACEs, and this is an inventory that is taken on the number of childhood trauma experiences that are taken into account. So the more traumatic experiences that there are, the more at risk a child might endure as they mature. It's not to say that this is what's going to happen when we talk about at risk. It's just meaning that if they don't get the support needed, it might happen. Certain side effects or certain things might happen later. And I'll talk a little bit about ACEs in a little bit. And then other things that are important are childhood traumatic stress. Children who have been exposed to one or more traumatic events in their lifetime, and how they develop reactions that persist in their daily life. Trauma affects everyone. It does not discriminate against race or gender or age. each traumatic experience may have a different effect on each person. One should not group experiences together. And then there is self-regulation. Traumatic experiences can affect self-regulation and the ability to manage emotions. This is where there may be intense feelings and it is hard to overcome by. There might be cultural awarenesses to keep into effect. That one particular person's culture may react to trauma differently than another culture. And then with each traumatic experience that's out there comes a potential at-risk factor. And with COVID-19 as being one of the most recent, along with our newest of the fires, there might even be greater risk of additional things that might happen. So with increased risks due to things like COVID-19 and the wildfires, there might be family stressors. Sometimes the inevitable happens, and children and adults endure a number of traumatic events. And for many of us, we have endured multiple fires and a continued pandemic. This may not include other traumatic events that do not encompass this. For every new traumatic situation can come a new risk factor. And so there might be child abuse and neglect, that sometimes these cases might increase or may also go unnoticed because we're all on distance learning. There might be loss of family members and bereavement. There might be more childhood traumatic stress. Distance learning and the wildfires may create even more than what was anticipated earlier. That there are also warning signs from the FBI that human and sex trafficking can increase, and that there is also increased risk of self-harm, suicide due to social isolation. So these are all factors that have come in from some workshops that I've attended this year, and I wanted to share these with you in regards to, what to look for. So now I'd like to show a video on how to help your child deal with traumatic events. I mean, one of the things I want to do in this presentation is to make sure that you have enough resources and tools that you can use to support your son or daughter, and also to support yourself too.
My heart broke for her. She looked so afraid. I wanted to take her pain away.
All the kids involved were so overwhelmed. We just tried to make them feel safe.
I felt helpless, like there was so much more I should be doing to make things better for him, but I couldn't find the right words.
I struggled with my own fear and trauma after the hurricane. But I needed to find a way to help my kids deal with their feelings too.
These are the voices of adults who are close to children in the immediate aftermath of a traumatic event. They might be parents, family members, teachers, clergy, first responders, medical personnel, humanitarian workers, or concerned volunteers. During those critical first hours and days after a trauma, adult presence and support is especially important for children. Any adult can make a difference for a child who has suffered a traumatic experience, regardless of the type of event. Keep a few important tips in mind. Provide safety. This is the most important tip of all. The feeling of safety after trauma is paramount, especially for children. Trauma survivors often describe feeling fear and vulnerability. Any small gesture of safety goes a long way. Talk with the child. Help the child understand, if possible, what happened in the event. Stick with the facts. There is no need to ask a child to discuss his or her own experience, but be available and ready if it is helpful. This allows him or her to make sense of emotional reactions such as fear or grief. hold the child. If appropriate, human touch can be very beneficial for children who are afraid and feeling vulnerable. In the aftermath of a frightening experience, touch from a trusted adult or someone trying to help can be a big part of making a child feel secure. Never force this, as it can be unwanted, but making yourself available is an act of protection, safety, and comfort. Relax the rules, but maintain structure. It is okay to allow for some changes to rigid rules in an attempt to show the child you understand the magnitude of what happened. However, children respond well to a schedule and regimen that they can count on to remain the same, especially when things around them seem to be changing or uncertain. For example, young people can be excused from school immediately following an event. Soon after, however, they may find comfort in the structure offered by school, even if classes are modified in order to discuss what happened. Help others. Giving your time and energy to others who may have also experienced the trauma is helpful for everyone involved. It helps those who need you, empowers you to feel like you are actively making a difference, and provides a good role model of service and giving for children who might be looking for an example to follow. People who share a traumatic experience can also experience the strength and hope of healing with others. Trauma is difficult for everyone. There is no single right response after a traumatic event. Recovery is a process and requires understanding from others and time for healing. However, everyone needs to feel safe and cared for, especially children. Knowledge of a few important tips can arm you with strength that you can share with children who might be especially frightened and vulnerable in the immediate aftermath of trauma. It allows you to help, and with that help comes hope.
So before I go on, I just wanted to say that if you have any questions about this presentation, you're welcome to email me at lcooper@mwusd.org or Antonio Garcia at agarcia@mwusd.org. And we'd be happy to talk with you, or if you'd like to reach out and talk to us and set up an appointment, we can also do that as well through the distance learning or by phone. So we just finished this video, and I really just wanted to highlight these things that were mentioned. You know, I think most importantly is not to force kids to talk about things that they don't want to talk about with regards to traumatic experiences. When they're ready, they'll talk. And it's something that it's important to remember it's important for all of us to remember that it's nothing to get over, it's stuff that we have to work through. And that can be really difficult, especially when we have other agendas and other things that we have to get accomplished, you know, in a short period of time. That when we are working with somebody who has suffered a traumatic event, that, you know, they're all at different locations, and what we can do is be a good listener and help them cope and work through what it is that they're working through in that moment. Some traumatic events may take a lifetime, and others may not take that long. And sometimes when there are a number of traumatic events, sometimes we have to figure out different ways in order to help with students during that time. And so the DSM connects these 5 different disorders with trauma. It's not to say that your son or daughter will have this, or somebody in your family has this. It's just kind of, I wanted to kind of express a little bit about some of the disorders that are out there. So a post-traumatic stress disorder in particular, it has to apply to somebody who's over the age of 6, and that there's exposure to death, serious injury, violence, or other major intense situation, and that symptoms have to exist for 1 month or more. And then you're looking at ATSD or acute stress disorder. It's 3 days to 1 month, and that's the difference between the two. And then there is reactive attachment disorder, and those are people who might exhibit symptoms of developmentally inappropriate attachments towards others, or that there's a disconnect between people. And then you have disinhibited social engagement disorder, and it's like overly familiar behavior with relatives or relative strangers, and boundaries are crossed. And again, it's not to say that this is going to happen. I just wanted you to be aware that these specific disorders are somehow one way or another connected with some form of trauma. And of course, adjustment disorders or significant distress or impairment in a social occupational area that may not apply to one of the other disorders. And I think what's more important, if anything, is remembering that we're working through this, not getting over it. So then when looking at trauma, this is the outcome. These are some of the symptoms that might happen, or some of the at-risk symptoms that might happen with somebody. Some might be more long-term than others, but these are some many examples of different reactions, and each person will have react a little bit differently than the next person. And so it's important not to compare one person to another person, because everybody handles it a little bit differently. But I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of the event and the experience and what the effect is with that. And it can be distressing. There can be decline in academics, a decline in self-regulation, bad behavior, maladaptive behaviors might surface, and experiences will vary, and emotions may be very overwhelming. And then I want to talk a little bit about the common words with trauma, and that these terms are closely associated with trauma. So triggers, for example, they're flashbacks or memories of something that had happened in the past. And many a times these will happen this will happen on a day-to-day basis, and a student may become triggered by it, like the sound of the wind to the smell of smoke in the air. And so each trigger is a little bit different. And so perhaps understanding your child's triggers might help you figure out what it is that that person might need. And it's very personal, and triggers affect each person differently, as we suggested. So with triggers, there might be avoidance in behaviors. Kids or adults may not want to do certain things when they are triggered by a reaction. There is an emotional intensity to it that somebody might respond really aggressively, or they might respond in a way that you wouldn't normally think that somebody would respond to something like that. There are times when I hear that the school is being shut down, for example, and I get a little emotional when I hear that. And so that would be as an example. Just a second. Sorry. So, when you hear something like that, can be a trigger as well. I mean, get teary-eyed about hearing and seeing or feeling something that has happened. Triggers can be activating in one or more areas in any of the senses: the sight, the sound, the touch, the smell, and the taste. And then these are common triggers in children. And distance learning in and of itself can be a trigger. The fact that kids are not able to socialize with their peers and go to school, it might be something that will come down the pipes later on, where kids will, when we do get back to school, it might be triggering for kids based on the experiences of being in distance learning, that there's unpredictability. Transitions are a challenge, and sensories are overwhelming, and some kids may feel disrespected when they're called out, when teachers or parents don't mean to do so. there might be oversensitivity, and confrontation might be a trigger. So I think if anything, just remembering like what are your child's triggers and knowing what you can do to support them. It's also important to remember your own triggers too, and that if we can recognize our own triggers, then we can be of support to students, or when we can be of support to children when they're having triggers. Some triggers might be the same and others might be a little bit different. And then we're looking at adverse childhood experiences. Children under the age of 18 who have endured some kind of an abuse, neglect, or other adverse experience. The events are situational. There's a correlation between high scores, meaning like the number of traumatic experiences, and at-risk behaviors. ACEs, this is a research that was done a number of years ago that said that there's people with a higher score of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, have more long-term health problems. And it may lead to other unhealthy behaviors such as overeating, suicide attempts, drug addictions, and maladaptive behaviors. This is an example of a screening of questions that might be asked, and that the higher the score, the higher the ACE score, the more at risk you might be in one of the following in the last bullet. And then there's vicarious trauma, and this is about perhaps a traumatic worker or helper that takes on the client's or student's sharing of a specific event. The feelings can become overwhelming and taxing and cumbersome, and it can interfere with the helper's ability to provide and support the support that is needed for the child or adult, and can cause sadness, guilt, grief, irritability, and mood swings. And I want to argue that, you know, especially with parents who are working, when you're working with your son or daughter for the number of hours and days that you do, like you're on all the time, when they bring in or they share their experiences, it's hard not to become vicarious through your child and to wanting the very best for them and being affected by what is going on for them, in addition to perhaps some of the trauma that you might be going through or experiencing as a parent. So then we'll look at briefly on the effects of trauma on the brain. That when a traumatic event happens, a lot of things go on in our body. One are chemicals such as cortisol is released into the body, which will affect the adrenal system, and that just kind of gets you going and up and about, and it's you're on alert, you're on high alert. It puts your part of your brain, the amygdala, into hijack. You can't think anything about other than what's going on. And somebody who might have triggers or other traumatic symptoms may not be able to get out of that amygdala hijack. There's this constant survival mode. You're struggling, or a child or an adult is struggling to navigate through the day-to-day routine of life. And it affects the cortex of your brain, and the body becomes taxed and inoperative. And that's what they're talking about with ACEs, is that over time, if this is not regulated and not dealt with, it can lead to long-term effects. But again, I want to kind of point back to the idea that this is about us working through to support one another rather than getting over it. So I wanted to show a video on PTSD.
Many of us will experience some kind of trauma during our lifetime. Sometimes we escape with no long-term effects, but for millions of us, those experiences linger, causing symptoms like flashbacks, nightmares, and negative thoughts that interfere with everyday life. This phenomenon, called post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, isn't a personal failing. Rather, it's a treatable malfunction of certain biological mechanisms that allow us to cope with dangerous experiences. To understand PTSD, we first need to understand how the brain processes a wide range of ordeals, including the death of a loved one, domestic violence, injury or illness, abuse, rape, war, car accidents, and natural disasters. These events can bring on feelings of danger and helplessness, which activate the brain's alarm system, known as the fight, flight, freeze response. When this alarm sounds, the hypothalamic, pituitary, and adrenal systems, known as the HPA axis, work together to send signals to the parasympathetic nervous system. That's the network that communicates with adrenal glands and internal organs to help regulate functions like heart rate, digestion, and respiration. These signals start a chemical cascade that floods the body with several different stress hormones, causing physiological changes that prepare the body to defend itself. Our heart rate speeds up, breathing quickens, and muscles tense. Even after a crisis is over, escalated levels of stress hormones may last for days, contributing to jittery feelings, nightmares, and other symptoms. For most people, these experiences disappear within a few days to 2 weeks as their hormone levels stabilize. But a small percentage of those who experience trauma have persistent problems, sometimes vanishing temporarily, only to resurface months later. We don't completely understand what's happening in the brain, but one theory is that the stress hormone cortisol may be continuously activating the fight, flight, freeze response while reducing overall brain functioning, leading to a number of negative symptoms. These symptoms often fall into 4 categories: intrusive thoughts, like dreams and flashbacks, avoiding reminders of the trauma, negative thoughts and feelings like fear, anger, and guilt, and reactive symptoms like irritability and difficulty sleeping. Not everyone has all these symptoms or experiences them to the same extent and intensity. When problems last more than a month, PTSD is often diagnosed. Genetics, ongoing overwhelming stress, and many risk factors like pre-existing mental illnesses or lack of emotional support likely play a role in determining who will experience PTSD. But the underlying cause is still a medical mystery. A major challenge of coping with PTSD is sensitivity to triggers, physical and emotional stimuli that the brain associates with the original trauma. These can be everyday sensations that aren't inherently dangerous, but prompt powerful physical and emotional reactions. For example, the smell of a campfire could evoke the memory of being trapped in a burning house. For someone with PTSD, that memory activates the same neurochemical cascade as the original event. That then stirs up the same feelings of panic and helplessness, as if they're experiencing the trauma all over again. Trying to avoid these triggers, which are sometimes unpredictable, can lead to isolation. That can leave people feeling invalidated, ignored, or misunderstood, like a pause button has been pushed on their lives while the rest of the world continues around them. But there are options. If you think you might be suffering from PTSD, the first step is an evaluation with a mental health professional who can direct you towards the many resources available. Psychotherapy can be very effective for PTSD, helping patients better understand their triggers. And certain medications can make symptoms more manageable, as can self-care practices like mindfulness and regular exercise. What if you notice signs of PTSD in a friend or family member? Social support, acceptance, and empathy are key to helping and recovery. Let them know you believe their account of what they're experiencing, and that you don't blame them for their reactions. If they're open to it, encourage them to seek evaluation and treatment. PTSD has been called the hidden wound because it comes without outward physical signs. But even if it is an invisible disorder, it doesn't have to be a silent one. Mental health conditions impact millions of people around the world, yet are often misunderstood. Check out this playlist to get informed.
So I'm going to move on there because we're just, that video is just about over. But I think the most important thing is that whatever traumatic experience that your son or daughter may have experienced, we're here and open to talk with them or to talk with you and see what we can do to help. And I just wanted to, again, let you know that we're all here to help. And That also includes your teachers too. Your teachers have communicated to me that they they're here to help, and that if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. I talked with a couple of teachers that actually said that, excuse me, about how they. I asked them. I said, "What are some things that you would like me to ask, um, to tell or let parents know?" And many of them have said to me that that they want parents to know that to reach out to them. So just wanted to point that out. And so when we're looking at positive childhood experiences, um, these are like these are things that when kids who have been through a number of traumatic losses or have had some kind or some form of traumatic loss, that things turn out to be positive when children have the ability to talk to their family about feelings, that they are able to bounce back, be resilient during difficult times, as long as there's some form of consistency going on. They enjoy participating in community traditions. They feel like they belong at school. They have support from their friends. There are two non-parent adults who take a genuine interest in their child, and that they feel safe and protected by adults in their home. And when many, or if not all, of these things are put into place, you'll find that children have much more positive experience with regards to their childhood, especially if they've been through so much. And some things that I wanted to point out now are just some things that we can do to provide support for ourselves and at home with our children. And letting kids know that they're safe and supported is really important, and it's important to communicate that. And many a times we might have to say these things over and over again to help that reassurance with children. Building relationships, no matter who's it with, continuing to be there for people and continuing doing what you're doing, and allowing other relationships to form will also help deal with, help either with a member of your family or your children work through trauma. Assist students with social emotional learning that we talked about earlier, and remembering like these 5 areas of helping kids: being self-aware, being managing their emotions, and making responsible decisions, and having good relationships with others, and being socially aware. Continue to provide warm and friendliness like you normally would. And I would say too that many times some kids, when they have traumatic experiences, they might ask the same questions over and over and over again, and giving them the same answer over and over again is normal, and their brains are developing and working through something that has been traumatic. And continue to show that you care about your child's well-being, and inquire about how students are feeling, and or inquire how your child is feeling. You can do that daily or whatever you see fit. And opportunities to talk about how they're doing, and yet not necessarily pushing, and not avoiding the topic of COVID-19 or the wildfires. And for some, it might be helpful to have your son or daughter be on some kind of a behavior chart, and maintaining some kind of a structure. And those are some things that we can help you with if you are interested in that. So I think the other thing that I wanted to talk about is making sure that you take care of you. No matter how hard it is right now, all the things that we're going, it's important that you take time out for yourself. And even if it's just for a little bit of time, once a week, I can't stress the importance of that. And it's, it's something that will bring you joy. It helps you work on maintaining your own boundaries with your children. it allows there to be a break. And people who are unable or it's very difficult to take care of themselves, it can lead to, especially number 2, it can lead to burnout. It can lead to some re-traumatization. It can lead to being dissatisfied and frustrated. It lowers your resiliency, and it can lead to poor decision making. So whatever it might be to take care of yourself, whether it's taking a walk, calling a friend, doing some form of exercise to help you, helps you get back into, I guess you could say, back into the ball game and keep playing and keep working and supporting your child. And if you have more questions about that, you can certainly reach out to us. We'd be happy to support you. And other things that you can do to take care of yourself, recognize when you need help. And that's part of why we are reaching out to all of you, to know that we are here and open for you to contact us and let us help to support you during this difficult time. Maybe talk to somebody that you trust, or tell your friends and family how to support you, how to use self-talk, and to desensitize yourself so that certain specific stressors don't continue coming up. So when maybe you might want to contact either a counselor or administrator during distance learning, there are some things that you can do if you have concerns about your son or daughter. You might want to reach out to us or the administration and just ask for some guidance. If you see your son or daughter or somebody in your family showing signs of sadness from a few days to 2 weeks, somebody is becoming argumentative and resistant to instruction, like they're not going to listen and they're just going to continue arguing with everything that you're trying to do. There's lots of anxiety and stress over classwork or homework, and it's not easily navigatable. You can reach out to us. You're having difficulty with following directions, or somebody like your son or daughter is having difficulty following directions and you're not sure what to do. Maybe they've made comments to you online, or made comments to you or to other children about not wanting to live. We can certainly help and support you on that, or have done some kind of form of self-injury. Makes threats or comments towards other students. They're absent from, or they won't get on Zoom. Students won't get on Zoom, or they don't want to participate in class. Usually there's something else that's going on. And they show signs of being checked out or not engaged in a lesson. And so those are some things that you might want to consult with us over. And I know I'm giving you a lot of information today, but we want to thank you for listening to this short presentation. And if you have any questions or comments or concerns, email them to me. And we'd like to share, we'd like to just share what we have and our knowledge of how we can support you, and anything that you'd like to know more about. So we're going to have our next distance learning parent workshop in about a month, and it will be on how to work with children with regards to limits and boundaries over technology and other things. That's going to be on Wednesday, October 14th and Thursday, October 15th. Thank you so very much for taking the time to listen to this presentation. And I want to wish you a really good day, and take good care, and we look forward to hearing from you. Bye-bye now.